Public Nemesis Media.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a video that will show you the manipulative nature of the Antichkite. Who are the Antichkite? Why those are modern Macedonians who believe they are the children of Sasha Velikiot. They are loud, they are obnoxious, they are anti-Slavic, they hate the majority of modern Macedonians for not believing the BS about them being direct descendants of old Macedonians, and of course, they hate Greeks because the Greek people also claim descendants from the ancient Macedonians. Most people, including a lot of normal modern Macedonians, have sided with Greece because of the simple fact that the old Macedonians were a Hellenic people like the Greeks today. So, the logical conclusion for the Antichkite is to deny that the ancient Macedonians were Greeks, because them not being Greeks somehow automatically means that Sasha Velikiot is the granddaddy of the Antichkite. Case in point, some Antichkite uploaded a lecture by some history professor on the Kingdom of Macedon, where the professor argued that the ancient Macedonians were not Greeks. Here are some clips of him making arguments on how Alexander the Great and others were not Hellenes.
In this lecture, I plan to deal with the world of early Macedon, and Macedon is the homeland of Alexander the Great and, of course, his father, King Philip II. Although Alexander's mom, Olympias, came from what today is northwestern Greece from the region of Epirus, and Epirus was actually considered part of the Greek world. In the ensuing centuries, when this Bronze Age collapse occurred in Greece, Macedon seems to have been little affected by the migrations that led to the rearrangements of Greek dialects and Greek populations in the Greek homeland. And the Macedonians, as far as we can tell, and this is a surmise that has been the result of 2 generations of work by philologists, that is, experts in language, archaeologists, and historians, notably Professor Eugene Borza, whose work on Macedon is really a turning point in scholarship, and I owe a great deal to his work in the shadow of Olympus for this lecture. And Professor Borza and I have been friends for many years. And as he points out, the Macedonian language, as far as we can tell, was unintelligible to the Greeks. There are a number of indications of this. The most famous is in 328 BC, when Alexander gets into a drunken brawl with one of his officers, Clitus, and calls for his guard to arrest Clitus, and we're told by Plutarch, speaks in the Macedonian language because there were Greeks present, and Alexander did not want these Greeks to understand what he had just shouted. There's other indications that the inscriptions set up in Macedon in the time of Alexander the Great and earlier were done by Greek stonecutters, and the dialect of Greek, and Greek is divided into a series of different dialects, the dialect of Greek in these inscriptions is the dialect of the stonecutter. It's Dorian, it's Ionic, there's even, I gather, a couple of Thessalian and Aeolic inscriptions, and what it indicates is that there isn't any kind of Macedonian Greek dialect as far as we can tell. Now, most of the information we have on the Macedonian language is very limited. It's personal names and certain technical terms. But there seems a good reason to believe that Macedonian, while remotely related to Greek, goes back to a common Indo-European ancestor, in the time of Philip and Alexander was essentially unintelligible to most Greeks. Furthermore, Greeks found the Macedonian kings an anomaly. Those Greek intellectuals, such as Socrates, the Pan-Hellenist, figures such as Aeschines and Philocrates, who are political figures in Athens in the time of Philip II, who urged accommodation with Philip, they would call the royal family Greek. And they would then qualify it, and you Greek kings ruling over a barbarian people. It was inconceivable to Greeks that any Greek would put himself willingly under a king. Now, there were kings in Sparta, but these were constitutional rulers, essentially hereditary military commanders, and there were 2 of them. And in Sparta, both kings, the Agiad and Eurypontid kings, simply hated each other and never cooperated. And the Spartans lived under the rule of law. They lived under the institutions of a polis. So, from the viewpoint of the Greek world, the Macedonians were just not Greeks.
As you can already guess, the Antichkite are acting quite smug in the comments. Like, this professor said the ancient Macedonians weren't Hellenes. Take that, you Greek gypsies, and you Macedonian traders who say we're Slavs. You could think that this professor is some sort of supporter of the Antichkite, or that he was paid by them to say the things he said, but only because the Antichkite don't acknowledge the other thing said by the professor, that one being.
Now, today there is a Republic of Macedonia in the Balkans. It's a breakaway from Yugoslavia. That region represents, in antiquity, what would have been known as Upper Macedon. That is, the non-Macedonian regions brought into the Kingdom of Macedon. And it's an unfortunate use of the term because it is essentially approximates a Byzantine province of the early Middle Ages, of the 7th or 8th, 9th century AD. And the people living there speak a Slavic language, a South Slavic language, related to Bulgarian, but apparently distinct from Bulgarian. And these Macedonian Slavs, maybe 2.5 million strong, represent in large part people who had moved in there in the early Middle Ages. They have laid claim to Alexander and Philip as their kings. Who knows what any of these claims mean in the modern world? Some of these Macedonian Slavs may well have ancestry going back to the ancient Macedonians as well as everyone else who's gone through the Balkans.
Not a single word about that part of the lecture was written in the comments. Because that's how the Antichkite work. They cut out the stuff that doesn't fit their narrative and cherry pick the things that could work for their claims. Only to this day, I don't understand how does this proving that the old Macedonians were Greeks prove that modern Macedonians are direct and only descendants of those old Macedonians. Aside from the obvious manipulation of the masses, the Antichkite are most likely not to answer the questions that many people have in relations to their silly theory, which is actually a blessing in disguise, because when they do, you get stuff like this. So why did they stop speaking Macedonian and adopted a Slavic language? They never did. The Macedonian language is the origin of all Slavic languages, not the other way around. Really? Didn't know that. To all Russians, Czech, Polish too? Interesting. Yes, the Russians, Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, Ukrainians, Belarusians, Slovenes are descendants of the Scythians/Sarmatians and spoke Iranian languages before the translation of the Macedonians of the Holy Bible in Macedonian from Koine. And later, when the Scythians/Sarmatians came to Europe, they became German slaves. That is why the Germans called them Sklaven, which in German means slaves. But when the Macedonians went to Moravia to evangelize the German slaves called Sklaven, the Macedonians as Christians give them Macedonian Christian name that comes from the Macedonian word Slovo, and it is from Macedonian translation of the Holy Bible from the Gospel of John and means the blessed people in the word Jesus, bogoslovenite ludzie vo slovo to, slovenite Slavs. The Macedonians gave them that name because slaves cannot enter into the kingdom of God, and the word Slavs is in the Macedonian word for blessed. The Cyrillic and Glagolitic are made exclusively for the Macedonian language by the Macedonian people in Macedonia for the translation of the Holy Bible from Koine. I'm just gonna end this video right now because, one, I proved my point on how Antichkite manipulate people, and two, you don't really want to go any deeper into the minds of the Antichkite. Some other comments and videos from the same uploader show that there is no limit on how much stupidity they'll say. Just when you think they can't get any dumber, they prove over and over that they actually can and do. So we're gonna wrap it up now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the upcoming regular vids, cause we will be talking about Montenegro and the Montenegrin nation. It's going to be fun, but until then, stay safe, God bless, and goodbye.